I was a deputy assistant to the president and strategist in the office of the chief strategist, dealing on national security issues. You can guess which ones they are, to do with counterterrorism, radical Islam, the Muslim Brotherhood, the rising threat of China, Iraq and Syria and so forth. But I'd like to give you some kind of macro strategic context to what really happened, what changed at 1201 on January the 20th, what it means for America as we look forward to future national security missions, and what it may mean for you in terms of the missions that you are asked to undertake in the short to medium term. First things first, let me start with an anecdote, with a story, so you understand who the new commander-in-chief is. You may have heard about this story. We kept it quiet for as long as we could, but then somebody covered it, got the story in Breitbart. I have had the honor of teaching for the Special Warfare Center and School at Bragg for the better half of the last decade, teaching on the 18 Alpha Q course for officers, and the favorite course I taught on was the 180 Alpha Senior Enlisted course. And I did that for many, many years. Then I started my new job in the White House, and as part of the Q course, the soon-to-be Green Berets would always come to DC to see the interagencies, to visit the Pentagon, visit the DIA, visit the CIA, visit state. And for many, many years, I was given 3 hours with the future Green Berets to talk to them. After January the 20th, they still came to DC, but now I was a government employee, and I heard they were coming to the NSC for a briefing. They asked me, would I care to brief them as well, and I said I'd be delighted. So we had a discussion on ISIS and what they should expect in the future when it comes to special forces and the fight against ISIS. But before they arrived, about 2 weeks out, I had the crazy idea that these are people, these are young men. There was one female intel officer, but these are almost all men who are just about to become Green Berets. Wouldn't it be great, wouldn't it be super if they could meet the new commander-in-chief? So I sent an email to the front office, to the president's front office. Could he meet with these brave soldiers very quickly? And they said, yeah, that'd be great. After the lectures in the NSC, we walked them across from the Eisenhower office building into the West Wing, into the Roosevelt Room. The president came in, immediately connected with them. You can tell he loves our military. He loves those who wear the cloth of the Republic. And he chatted with them, connected with them for a good few minutes until time was up, because the president has a pretty busy schedule. But then, instead of saying goodbye and thank you, the president looked at all of these soon-to-be deployed warfighters, and he said to them, I'm not supposed to do this, but why don't you come with me? And we collected them all, we left the Roosevelt Room, and he led them over into the Oval Office. At the Oval Office, he sat down at the Resolute desk. He asked all 18 of them to stand behind him for a group photograph. And then the president, his schedule's already shot. We're way over time already, and his schedules are going crazy. And the president goes, that's not good enough. All of you stand over there and then come to me one by one. And at that point, the president asked the official White House photographer to take an individual photograph with each of these future Green Berets that they can take home to their units, to their groups, and use personally. None of this was reported in the media. This wasn't a photo moment because, of course, these are future operators. But that tells you the level of commitment that this new commander-in-chief has. So that's the personal aspect you should be aware of. Let's look at the strategic and the operational. After that briefing, in fact, the previous briefer from the NSC, who's a Tier 1 officer who's been detailed to DC, came up to me. I hadn't met him before, but clearly a very, very serious professional. And he knew who I was, and he decided to share with me what his compadres are telling him out in the field. There's always that frustration, right? You came in to be a warfighter, you're in DC wearing a suit, and all your buddies are out there doing exciting things. or training for the next deployment. And he said, you have no idea. This was very, very early into the new administration. He said, you have no idea how unleashed my brothers in arms, my sisters in arms are out in the field. They knew immediately, week one of the administration, that the military professionals of America, be they reservists, be they National Guard, be they regular army or other services, we've been unleashed. No more ridiculous ROEs, no more 8,000-mile screwdriver with people in the White House making tactical decisions about what should be happening in Fallujah or in the Hindu Kush or in Tora Bora. So you can tell, you know this, you've spoken to your friends, to your colleagues in theater. We have an administration now that trusts you, that trusts anybody that wears the uniform of the United States, and allows you to exercise your judgment as you have been trained in your professional MOS areas. So that's how the culture has already changed in just the last few weeks and months. And then let's look at the strategic aspect of the new administration. The president, I met him first in the summer of 2015 in his offices in New York, and we discussed national security issues prior to a Republican presidential candidate's debate. And the thing that struck me almost instantly, the first thing, of course, is the obvious thing, that Donald J. Trump is kryptonite to political correctness. He absolutely detests political correctness. That in itself endeared me to him. But secondly, he understood that we are at war, that the threat from radical Islamic terrorism is a real threat, and it is a threat of war. And additionally, not only does he know that, he knows that we are at war, but he wants to win that war. That was before he became the commander-in-chief. Since that time, you've seen his determination with regards to the Moab in Afghanistan, the cruise missile strike in Syria. You've seen that we have upped. Think about this. This is one metric that almost always catches people by surprise. We have upped the defense budget in this country by an amount of money that is in fact more, just the uptick is more than the defense budgets of large nations in NATO, in Europe. That tells you the determination of this president to fix things that have been broken for the last 20 years in our military. If you look at the current operational environment, we have massive op tempo, we have high burnout rates, but this administration will deal with them. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to understand that we need a strategic shift in how we approach threats like the Islamic State. Under the last 8 years, under the Obama White House, we had a misdiagnosis of the threat. We were told that it's not about religion, it's not about ideology, it's about unemployed people. You remember the famous line from the State Department Deputy Spokeswoman Maria Harp, who said, we'll be safe as long as we get jobs for jihadis. Well, we who came into the administration realized you don't become a jihadi just because you're unemployed or your daddy didn't hug you. You become a jihadi because you subscribe to an evil ideology that is jihadism. And the president has called it out for an evil ideology, most recently in his Riyadh speech. So first, we diagnose the threat truthfully. No political correctness allowed into the threat assessment. Our course of action is informed by an honest appraisal of who the enemy is and what it's going to take to defeat them. Secondly, our approach isn't what we've seen for the last 8 years, which is a strategy of attrition. You've seen the Obama administration nibble at the edges of this threat and unfortunately telegraph to the enemy what we're going to do. We're going to come to Mosul in 3 weeks. No, it's going to be 6 weeks. Whatever it was, bad idea. You do not tell the enemy what you're about to do because the enemy will then use it against you. Under Secretary Mattis, we have gone from the strategy of attrition, nibbling at the edges, to a strategy of annihilation. To quote one Tier 1 operator who spoke to me recently, he said, JSOC and our other elements in theater are stacking ISIS jihadis like cordwood. We are the most powerful nation the world has ever seen. and we are now being allowed, people like yourselves are being allowed in theater to exercise that incredible force to destroy. And when the president tells Congress at that joint session that he will obliterate the Islamic State, he means that. This isn't just rhetoric. He absolutely means we will obliterate them. So what else can you expect? Before I left the White House on Friday, I'd spent quite a bit of time supporting the drafting of the new national security strategy, the highest unclassified expression of the president's view of the world and how we're going to deal with the threats that we have inherited. We inherited a world on fire. You just look at any of the cardinal points of the compass, whether it's Russia invading Crimea, whether it's China building those fake atolls and putting military bases on them, whether it's a nuclearizing Iran, whether it's the Islamic State, whether it's North Korea and its ballistic missiles. We inherited a mess. We had 8 years of so-called leading from behind, this strategic patience that was exploited by our enemies and our adversaries, and that's something that we will deal with robustly, or my colleagues inside the White House will deal with robustly. One of the key things that informs the understanding of those in the building is that, and I know this sounds strange given who the audience is, military force is only a part of the solution. There are many other tools of statecraft, many other instruments of power based upon intelligence, covert action, economic tools, diplomacy, alliance networks. We will be using all of them together. The idea that we had under the last administration, if you look at the argument for the Iran deal, the JCPOA deal, if you remember, we were told fallaciously that we must sign this deal with Iran, because if we don't sign this deal with Iran, there will be war. So there's this crazy idea that the world is either all about diplomacy or it's all about war, and there's nothing between those two realities. That is a very, very simplistic and a very incorrect understanding of how strategy is done. That's what I wanted to share with you, how things have changed at the strategic level, the operational level, with regards to who the new commander-in-chief is. It's just a thumbnail sketch of everything that's happened in the last 8 months, but I'd love to respond to your questions, should you have any.
Yes, so you can hear me?
I can.
So we do have one question for you if you have just a second.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Sergeant Searcy here with the 45th MP Company out of Reno, Nevada. I just have a question as far as how does the White House view the National Guard as it pertains to national security?
I think I'd have to ask those people inside the defense policy shop of the NSC if there's any significant change in how the White House views the National Guard. Having watched the president during the campaign and after the campaign when he was sworn in as commander-in-chief, for him, he understands the concept of the citizen soldier. So this has a very special place in his heart because it's such a historic aspect of who we are as a nation. And it's such an American tradition that you have people who make a full-time career in the regular armed forces, you have reservists, you have various branches, but the National Guard, I think, has a special place in the heart of the president. But it would be presumptuous of me. I didn't deal with National Guard issues. I've addressed the National Guard Bureau and other organizations over the years, but specifically, if there's any policy changes, it's early days. I always like to tell people, look, we are in month 8, not year 8 of the administration. I would hold until the new national security strategy is published. Should be, God willing, sometime in this calendar year. I don't expect any massive changes, but I think there will be at least one thing that I'll comfortably predict right now. Just a recognition of all that you've done. a recognition of the last 16 years, the pressure upon not just the services writ large, but on the National Guard. I think that will be recognized some way by the President and the administration, because that's who he is. He wants to recognize service to this nation, and the National Guard's contribution to securing the Republic is something that should be recognized.
Well, thank you. That was an excellent question and an excellent answer. I appreciate you taking the time. And just so you know, and I might be wrong, but you are the first person that has done a two-way communications video with our conference. So you're going to go down in EANGUS history, sir. I appreciate you.
Look, it's the 21st century. It's my pleasure.